Hello everyone, welcome to Global Government News. Today is Sunday, January 9th, 2011, and I'm Darko. Welcome to this economic news bulletin, everyone. I usually start off by asking my new listeners, or my old-time listeners even, to check out my website, www.ggnonline.com. That's ggnonline.com. We're going to just move forward here and start off with the headlines. We're going to start off with oil. Oil slips as dollar stronger, equities dip. Oil prices fell on Friday in volatile trade as the stronger dollar and stock market slide erased earlier gains in crude started this year with a weekly loss. And it looks like oil prices are going to be going up. It says here, ex-Shell president sees $5 gas in 2012. This article was from December 27th, 2010. But it's still relevant. It says the former president of Shell Oil, John Hofmeister, says Americans could be paying $5 for a gallon of gasoline by 2012. And he says, I'm predicting actually the worst outcome over the next 2 years, which takes us to 2012 with higher gasoline prices. And we move to this, and we know that if you checked out my last video, last economic news video, you had the individual, a little interview that was going on with some little economic news pundits, and one of them was talking about how the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, basically we're going to hold a meeting in July, and they're not going to be holding a meeting until July to basically figure out what they're going to do as far as the supply goes. Are they going to produce more in that? But they're not until July. So whatever we have now is what we have to pay for. So he predicts that the oil prices will pass $100 a barrel between now and July, and we will face, on average here in the Midwest, it's about right now it already passed the $3 threshold, and now it's at about $3.10 per gallon. Alaska pipeline closes, drop in production by BP. Others threatens to push oil towards $100 a barrel, so that's not good. Says here, Democratic leaders push for income tax compromise. Madigan visits state Senate floor to press for tax hike. And it says House Speaker Michael Madigan took the rare step Wednesday of walking the floor of the Senate to garner support for a major income tax increase, a move some Democratic lawmakers hope will lead to a compromise as a lame duck session draws to a close. And it's just stupid political crap. But anyways, out there in Romania, they actually have, they call them witches. I don't know if they're actually witches, but this has some Romanians that, what are they, tarot card readers or palm readers being charged income tax now in Romania, and I guess they're talking about basically putting a hex on them, putting the old hex on them. So it's crazy that some places they don't even pay income tax. Even in the United States, there's some states that don't, or cities or counties that don't pay income tax. It says euro at 4-month lows versus dollar. The euro plumbed 4-month lows versus the dollar earlier in Asia on Monday after stops were triggered and thin trade as worries about Europe's debt crisis mounted. Always got to be a crisis, isn't there? It says record high food prices stoke fears for the economy. It says record high food prices are moving to the top of policymakers' agendas driven by fears it could stoke inflation, protectionism, and unrest and dent consumer demand in key emerging economies. Next up is Algeria seeks to end riots with food price moves, but 14 die in Tunisia. The Algerian government over the weekend said it will reduce tax and import duties on some staples in a bid to end days of deadly clashes between police and rioters protesting food prices in the North African country. Said here, the eruption came amid widespread anti-government protests over high unemployment rates in nearby Tunisia, in which at least 14 protesters died in clashes with police over the weekend, according to state media there. Top Algerian officials held an emergency meeting Saturday after several days of widespread violence triggered in part by a sharp rise in the price of cooking oil and sugar. So see, that's what happens, man. It's when people aren't independent anymore and they're not living and they're not growing their own food, they don't have their own water supply, they're screwed because you're totally relying on this system, this political and social and economic system, which sucks. I totally disagree with the way all of those are run. And, I was watching a clip from, what was it, MSNBC with, was a Contessa Brewer or something like that, and she was talking about how people end up committing suicide because they basically try to save up for their retirement, and their pensions are basically, they lose their pensions due to these frauds and budget cuts, and the state basically going insolvent and filing for bankruptcy, and they lose their retirement, they lose their future. And I'm like, man, dude, it's like if people could just have their own lands, right? If they didn't have to pay rental tax for the land that they owned. That's what you pay when you pay property tax. You're paying a rental tax because you don't own the actual property unless you have the allodial title. So it's like if you actually did have the allodial title, so when you paid for the land, you paid for the house, you paid for the land, you own the land underneath the house. So you wouldn't be paying property taxes to the state. You wouldn't be paying a rental tax. If that were the case, well, then if you got a nice 5 acres, 10 acres, I mean, you can grow your own food. You can hopefully figure out a water supply, and you literally don't have to work. You just have to live at your house. I mean, enough to be able to purchase the home and the property, but I mean, that would be nice. That would be a good feeling. And back in the day, that's how people used to do it. They would sit there and they'd work until they were 80, 85 years old on the farm with the chickens, and they were healthy as hell. They're all very healthy people, and they live long lives. And, I think it's just a lot of disinfo. I think it's a lot of disinfo about the whole plain living concept, because now you're forced. I mean, you can't do that anymore. Even if you try to do that, you're going to have to pay the property taxes, so you're going to have to go out and get a job, right? So it really sucks. It really sucks with the position that we're in right now. And Algeria, 2 killed in riots over rising food prices. Algeria says 2 protesters died in spreading youth riots mimicking unrest in neighboring Tunisia. 2 demonstrators died in spreading unrest over rising food prices in this North African nation, the interior minister said Saturday, and the government announced that it will cut the cost of sugar and cooking oil. So same thing. Says 29% of Americans say it's difficult to afford food. The Pew Research Center for the People and Press released their year-end survey on December 15th, 2010. Their poll revealing that for the public, a tough year ended on a down note, consistent with the moods of the nation all year. 2010 is closing on a down note. Fully 72% are dissatisfied with national conditions. 89% rate national economic conditions as only fair or poor, and a majority of pluralities think the country is losing ground on 9 of 12 major issues. It says here that the survey finds that a majority of the public, 57%, say it is very difficult to afford things they really want. About the same percentage said this 2 years ago, about 55%. And for many Americans, affording basic necessities remains a struggle. 51% say it's difficult to afford health care. 48% say the same about their home heating and electric bills, and 29% say it's difficult to afford food. And it's like, and that's not even probably including the fact that people want to eat organic food and they can't afford that. Like me, I can't afford organic food. It's just, you can say, yeah, you can do it, you can do it, but, yeah, you won't be eating any meat at all because it's so expensive. You can get the other stuff, it's somewhat affordable. But for the most part, yeah, the food is more expensive. Just regular food, the regular GMO food is, eugenics food is getting more expensive, so obviously the organic is too. Anyways, Brazil's inflation in 2010 at 6-year high. Brazil's inflation reached 5.91% in 2010, the highest in 6 years, its Statistics Bureau announced on Friday. And it says here, China's high inflation rate may last until quarter 3 survey. China's high inflation rate could continue well until the second or third quarter of this year, according to a survey of 56 leading economists. Speaking of economists, they foretell of U.S. decline in China's ascension. To hear a number of prominent economists tell it doesn't look good for the U.S. economy, not this year, not in 10 years. Leading thinkers in the dismal science speaking at the annual convention offer varying visions of U.S. economic decline in the short, medium, and long term. This year, the recovery may bog down as government stimulus measures dry up. And it says here, U.S. defense visit will renew ties with a rising China. Stealth fighter jets in development, guided missiles. Actually, that was, I read about that after that was, I was so surprised that was all over. I was like reading It was on the cover of a local newspaper here in Northwest Indiana. I'm just like, why is that on the cover? I mean, really, dude, there's so many more important issues, dude. I mean, we're talking about theoretical stealth fighter jets, and it came out the next day that they didn't even have them. So I'm just like, why did they even put that in there? I mean, the biggest story was that they're going to be removing or not. I wish they were going to be removing fluoride. They're going to lower the amount of poison in the water supply. I think that's the biggest story, the biggest news, man. We should be like jumping up and down, right? It's going to be less fluoride while you're taking a shower, less fluoride where you're cooking your pasta, less fluoride, for if you give your dog tap water. But says guided missiles dubbed carrier killers. As America's top defense official visits China next week, its growing military capabilities are redrawing the security landscape in Asia, putting the country with the largest standing army on potential collision course with the United States. Well, that's what you have when you have a state. So, I mean, that's just the way it is. If you had no governments, you wouldn't be having these big, humongous military infrastructure being built up, all at the expense of these poor people who are having this money raped from them, and they don't really have a choice. So, if you were in a free market where everything was done voluntarily, then basically there would be no desire for that, right? There would be no desire to build up a humongous standing army. So, just throwing that out there. Rising China to endure criticism. This is directly from their website, the People's Daily Online. Most Chinese people would firmly agree that China could or should maintain its rise to power, but a country's rise comes at a price. Just look at the events in 2010. How many frictions did China encounter with Western countries? How many neighboring countries were also involved in such troubles? China buys up EU government debt. China has been increasing its holdings of European government debt, including that issued by Spain amid the Eurozone crisis. Chinese Vice Commerce Minister Gao Hucheng was quoted as saying on Thursday. So it says the Spanish daily El País on Thursday cited Spanish government sources as saying China is committed to buy about 6 billion euros or $7.89 billion worth of Spanish sovereign debt. 19 facts. This should be interesting. It says 19 facts about the deindustrialization, of America that will blow your mind. And it says basically the United States becoming the first post-industrial nation on the globe. And we're going to move down here and just read them off. For people like that, take this article and print it out and hand it to them. Perhaps they will read below will shock them badly enough to waken them from their slumber. The following are 19 facts about the deindustrialization of America that will blow your mind. The United States has lost approximately 42,400 factories since 2001. Dell Incorporated, one of America's largest manufacturers of computers, has announced plans to dramatically expand its operations in China with an investment. Oh, I lost track here. With an investment of over $100 billion over the next decade, Dell has announced that it will be closing its last large U.S. manufacturing facility in Winston-Salem, North Carolina in November. Approximately 900 jobs will be lost. Number 4, in 2008, 1.2 billion cell phones were sold worldwide. So how many of them were manufactured in the United States? 0. Number 5, according to a new study conducted by the Economic Policy Institute, if the U.S. trade deficit with China continues to increase at its current rate, the U.S. economy will lose over 500,000 jobs this year alone. Wow. Number 6, as of the end of July, the U.S. trade deficit with China has risen 18% compared to the same time period a year ago. Number 7, the United States has lost a total of about 5.5 million manufacturing jobs since October of 2000. According to tax notes, between 1999 and 2008, employment at the foreign affiliates of U.S. parent companies increased an astounding 30% to 10.1 million. During that exact time period, U.S. employment at American multinational corporations declined 8%. Says number 9, finishing up here, in 1959, manufacturing represented 28% of the U.S. economic output. In 2008, represented 11.5%. Says, just skip here, at the end of 2009, less than 12 million Americans worked in manufacturing. That time, less than 12 million Americans were employed in manufacturing, was in 1941. In the U.S. today, consumption accounts for 70% of GDP. Of this 70%, over half is spent on services. Has lost a whopping 32% of its manufacturing jobs since the year 2000. Moving on here, the U.S. spends approximately $3.90 on Chinese goods for every dollar that the Chinese spend on goods from the United States. 43 million Americans are now living in poverty. This is GGN, and I'm Darko. Thank you.